Recently, NASCAR's inconsistent race control decisions have caused a lot of frustration. We expect fairness and consistency, but instead, we're all just getting more and more confused. Atlanta Motor Speedway once again delivered an incredible race. The side-by-side action and close finishes showed why it is one of the best superspeedway-style tracks on the schedule. But instead of celebrating the thrilling racing, people are talking about NASCAR's inconsistent officiating. This issue started at the Daytona 500 and has continued to cause controversy. For more than a decade, NASCAR had a clear rule. If a big crash happened on the final lap, the caution flag would be thrown. The leader at that moment would be declared the winner, and the system has been in place for years. And fans expected the same rule to apply to every race, but this year, NASCAR decided to change things without warning. At the Daytona 500, a massive crash occurred on the final lap, but NASCAR let the race finish under green. This was unusual because in similar situations in the past, they'd always thrown caution. The following weekend in the Truck Series and Xfinity Series races, big crashes happened on the last lap. NASCAR threw the caution flag both times, declaring the leaders as winners. This was the traditional way of handling things, which made the Daytona 500 decision even more confusing. Then came the Cup Series in Atlanta. Once again, a huge crash happened on the last lap. Fans expected NASCAR to follow the new precedent set at Daytona and let the race finish under green, but instead, they threw the caution flag, ending the race immediately. This decision angered many fans because it seemed unfair. If NASCAR had been consistent, they would have let the race finish like they did at Daytona. To make matters worse, NASCAR officials admitted they made a mistake the previous day. Elton Sawyer, NASCAR's senior vice president of competition, told the Cup Series drivers that if a crash happened on the final lap, they would throw a caution. This statement showed that NASCAR was changing the rule again. They could not even stay consistent for one full weekend. Fans were outraged because they felt robbed of a great finish. The Atlanta race could have ended with a thrilling three-wide battle between Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, and Carson Hocevar. But instead, the race was cut short because of NASCAR's sudden change in policy. Many people believe NASCAR should stick to one rule and apply it to every race. The traditional rule of throwing the caution flag for big crashes on the last lap makes sense. When cars are going over 180 miles an hour, any crash can be dangerous. Leaving the race green might encourage drivers to take unnecessary risks, leading to more wrecks and possible injuries. It is better to end a race under caution than to create a situation where drivers put themselves in danger just to gain a few positions. But the problem is not just about safety, the main issue is consistency. If NASCAR had followed their traditional rule of the Daytona 500, none of this controversy would exist. The decision to let that race finish under green set an expectation for fans. When NASCAR reversed course at Atlanta, it made their officiating look unprofessional. This is not the first time NASCAR has struggled with consistency. Over the years, there have been many debates about how they enforce penalties, how they call cautions, and how they handle overtime finishes. Each time a controversial decision is made, fans lose trust in the system. NASCAR needs to establish clear rules and follow them in every race. Despite all the controversy, the race in Atlanta had some incredible moments. Christopher Bell won the race in dramatic fashion, leading only the final lap. This was Toyota's second superspeedway victory since the next-gen car was introduced. In the past 20 superspeedway races, Ford and Chevrolet have dominated, so this was an important win for Toyota. Bell's victory was not easy. He battled with Kyle Larson in the closing laps. Both drivers come from dirt racing backgrounds and have a lot of respect for each other. They're not teammates and do not drive the same manufacturer, but they work together at times to reach the front. Carson Hocevar also had an impressive performance. He stayed in the top 10 all night and showed aggressive driving throughout the race. He blocked every move he could, jumped into any open lane, and made some enemies along the way. His determination paid off as he finished on the podium. Ryan Blaney had an impressive performance despite a major setback. Late in the race, he was spun around by Hocevar, yet he managed to save his car and stay in contention. Instead of getting caught in a big wreck, Blaney's skillful driving kept him on the apron, avoiding disaster. Despite losing track position with only 20 laps to go, he fought back and finished fourth, which is incredible considering the circumstances. Kyle Larson was another driver who didn't make many friends in this race, but last week, Jeff Gordon mentioned that Larson struggles with super speedway racing, and the statistics support that claim. Larson has never won on a drafting track, but he managed to win a stage in this race. However, his night took a turn when he made an aggressive move, thinking he was clear of Austin Cindric. Larson squeezed Cindric into the fence, causing a wreck that also collected William Byron. This was a brutal moment for Cindric, who had been dominant throughout the night, and 2 weeks in a row, Cindric found himself in a winning position, only to be taken out by another driver. Team Penske had a strong showing, qualifying 1, 2, 3, 4, and controlling much of the race. But despite their dominance and leading laps and running up front, they couldn't secure the finishes they wanted. Josh Berry won a stage, but Kyle Larson took the other. The main Penske drivers, Cindric, Blaney, and Logano, failed to win a stage. Bubba Wallace, driving a Toyota, ended up earning the most stage points of the night, which was a surprise. Denny Hamlin took a different approach, staying quiet for most of the night and avoiding trouble. Kyle Busch was also near the front for much of the race and secured a top 10 result. Ross Chastain and Bubba Wallace had strong performances as well. Wallace in particular had a great points night and drove a car with an eye-catching paint scheme. John Hunter Nemechek also had a strong start to the season, securing back-to-back top 10 finishes. Michael McDowell had one of the most impressive recoveries of the night. At one point, he was 6 laps down due to a power steering issue and had to go to the garage for repairs, but somehow, his team got the car back on track, and through a series of wave arounds and free passes, he worked his way back onto the lead lap. In the end, he finished 13th, which is a remarkable comeback considering the problems he faced earlier in the race. Atlanta is different from Daytona and Talladega because of its tighter turns and shorter straightaways. The next-gen car struggles to handle big pushes at 200 miles an hour, but Atlanta's layout forces drivers to leave space in the corners. This means fewer multi-car wrecks and more single-car incidents. At one point, only 2 cars were out of the race despite several crashes. This showed that handling and skill mattered more at Atlanta compared to other superspeedway tracks. The best drivers and cars had a chance to make their way to the front, but unlike some races where the pack gets stuck in gridlock, Atlanta allowed for movement. It felt like the perfect balance between car performance, driver skill, and luck. Of course, luck always plays a role in racing. Some drivers like Austin Cindric and Chase Elliott had terrible luck, while others stayed out of trouble. The final lap crash was frustrating because it took away from an otherwise great race. Half a dozen cars spun out at 180 miles an hour, and Nascar decided to throw a caution. Some fans were upset because it prevented a side-by-side finish, but the overall race was still great. So that's all we have for today's episode. Don't forget to comment down your thoughts on this, and while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well.